My name is Dan Rivera, and I'm the mayor in the city of Lawrence. And we like to get part of the when we get projects like this, we like to have conversations with people in the community about what's planned for, get some feedback from people. And this is one of those sessions where somebody's going to come up here and talk about technical aspects of what you see upstairs, and you think like, oh, that seems like a silly thing, or that seems like a positive thing. And so this is the type of this is the time when you say, hey, this is a silly thing. What can we change this thing? Can we tweak this other thing? And so we want the input from folks because the Governor Baker was kind enough to give us $3 million, even though we asked for $6 million. We'll take $3 million. It's not bad, especially since we could see that there's been a little bit of neglect on this part of the city. But we wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff. We get a lot of partners and people that support us every day to make sure that we get the work of the city done. And right off the bat with us is our city councilor at large, is Anna Levy, and she's with us today. I just want to make sure we all recognize that she's here to support. And former state senator Barry Feingold is also with us in the back. A lot of this stuff happens because we get support from our colleagues in government. When I first came to be mayor, we were awarded the $4 million to do the Merrimack Street East, and it was just kind of weird to me because there seemed to be so much development on that side of the street. So we said we're going to squirrel out $300,000, was it? $250,000 from the $4 million to do a study on the west side. Wow, I haven't said this in a long time. And we needed to do that because you can't really do anything unless you got to study something so that you can plan on that, and then you can actually design off of that, and then you can actually build something. And so what we see here is drawings that come from a study, from a plan, and now we're ready to spend some money on here. And luckily for us, we had the $250,000 that we did to initiate that. It's the only way we could leverage this $3 million. We know there's probably $15 or $20 million worth of work on the street. The bridges notwithstanding, the canal, lighting, signage, a bunch of stuff. So we're gonna do the best we can with $3 million. If things get along the way that we need to figure out if we need a couple more dollars, we'll have to go back, talk to the state, talk to the federal government, try to figure out if we can make the difference. But all up and all in, we start with the $3 million. We started with how much on the other side?
We started with 4 and then we got
And it might end up someplace near 7. No, but that's the real thing. It's expensive to move lights. It's expensive to move gas and all those things. Oh, I forgot. Our chief of police is with us here. Roy Vasquez is with us. So make sure if you have any questions about public safety, let us know. Evan, you the chair of the? Where's Evan? Are you the chair of the LRA? Yeah. Chair of the Lawrence Redevelopment Authority, Evan Silverio. The important part of that is, again, you have to study stuff and then make a plan out of it. And they did a plan about urban renewal. And so if things you feel like we really need to do something, take the canal or move a bridge, something really, really big, you have to have an urban renewal plan for that. And Evan and the people at the LRA did a plan, the first plan in a generation, since they did a lot of bad things with the old urban renewal plan. God was not happy. But it's not like your granddad's urban renewal plan. This is it was an inclusive process. It's not really so much about what do we tear down as much as what we build, and how the future of the city could look. So Evan's here. He can talk to you a little about that if you guys have any questions. This is to support what I consider the last industrial virgin land in the city. There's a lot of property that's left unused. And we wanted to make sure that it gets developed in a way that increases the commercial and employment output for the city. We're not looking to do housing on this strip of land. We're not on this part of the street. We're not looking for any of that stuff because we think what really is needed here for us is really jobs. And so if you own a business on this street, what we want to do with this $3 million, we look to support you in your efforts, what we do now. So if you see something silly that hurts your process, just let us know. This is also things that we're working with. A couple of other things, not just the urban renewal plan, not just with Merrimack Street East, but also the rail trail project that's being done at the far end of Merrimack that we hope, when developed, it's a multi-million-dollar project that will take us from this side of the canal across the river through North Lawrence to Methuen, and it connects to the Methuen rail trail. So all these things are kind of together. So we're trying to do the best we can in planning for it. when you start talking about things like that, $3 million doesn't seem like a lot of money, but I think when we talk about how we can use $3 million to impact this area, I think it'll go a long way to making us a little bit more comfortable and making your business a little bit better. I'm going to stop talking, and a guy from TEC, the engineer company, is that the TEC stuff? The engineer corporation? They're going to come up and talk to you about what's up on the board, and then later we'll just take questions and go through it. All right, everybody good? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. My name is Jonathan Rockwell. I'm a professional engineer and Transportation Engineering Services Manager with TEC. We're the design consultant to the city on this project. I'm here with Jake Carmody. He's a project manager with the project as well. So the design, as you see, that we're going to present here tonight is currently, it's relatively early stages still. It's at the 25% design level, more or less. And the opportunity tonight is, the idea is to present the project to you, give you the opportunity to provide some feedback, ask some questions, and hopefully we can provide answers to kind of explain the project to you, explain the goals of the project and the benefits of the project. Now, primary goals of the project are to upgrade the accommodations for all users of the corridor along Merrimack Street between South Union and Broadway. That's the vehicles that use it, the drivers, pedestrians that are using the sidewalks and pedestrian crossings, and bicyclists that may be up and down the corridor. Also want to improve safety for those users as well. That's paramount in addition to improving accommodations, improving safety as well. Now, second goal is really to maximize the use of the available right-of-way along the corridor, expanding the scope of the project to the extent we can, extending the benefits of the project to the extent we can within the available funding that the mayor mentioned was from the MassWorks grant program, the $3 million fund that was granted to the city. The third primary goal is really to balance those goals, those first two goals, with the needs of the abutting commercial and industrial property owners along here, maintaining the current operations and business operations that they have today to the extent that can be done, while still meeting the first two goals. The project begins just east of Broadway. And the typical section in this segment would consist of a 7-foot sidewalk on the south side of the roadway. The sidewalk is a little wider than the minimum that's required to allow some accommodation for the utility poles that's along there. Provide a 5-foot bicycle lane eastbound, 2 through travel lanes, and then provide an 8-foot parking lane through this segment here. Beyond the parking lane, vertical curb, similar to today. However, there'll be a grass buffer. And then along the canal, proposing an 8-foot shared use path, which allows both bicycles and pedestrians to use the path bidirectionally, so in both directions on Merrimack Street, along the canal side. Now, the views you see over here are intended to kind of give you a visualization of this first segment of the corridor between Broadway and Parker Street. Just a before photo looking to the east, and then a visualization, a rendering of what the post-construction condition might look like with the sidewalk, street lighting, bicycle lane, grass buffer with lighting on this side as well, and then that wider shared use path along the canal. Now, kind of focusing on the intersection of Parker Street itself, you can see that as you approach Parker Street, the grass buffer that I spoke of before and the parking lane have now been eliminated to allow for the accommodation of a left turn lane to Parker Street. Also, zooming in here, you see the intersection of Parker Street historically and more recently has been designated as a high crash location within the state. And that high crash designation means that it's within the top 5% of signalized intersections within the region. So it's in that top 5%, very high crash rate. So the measures that we're looking at here to address that safety issue are reconstruction of the traffic signal, including new pedestrian signals around the intersection, those new traffic signal equipment will allow for more efficient and safe operations, allowing for an exclusive left turn phase, which will mean that coming off of Parker Street, a vehicle in the left turn lane will get a green arrow and have no opposing movements and be able to make that move. Similarly, on eastbound Merrimack Street, the traffic signal will provide that same operation where someone turning left onto Parker Street will have that protected movement. And then also Merrimack Street eastbound, we're kind of formalizing and delineating the turn lanes a little better. So this will be designated as an exclusive right turn lane to Parker Street. And then on Parker Street, again, restriping and formalizing that two-lane approach. Around the intersection, all of the pedestrian accommodations, those curb ramps will be reconstructed, bring those up to ADA compliance. And then, as we now begin to move further east down the corridor past Parker Street, we're introducing a different typical section through here, where along the south side of the roadway is a slightly narrower sidewalk. And the reason for that is in this segment of the corridor, there's more of a constrained right-of-way. There's less right-of-way that the city owns, less property that the city owns to accommodate the lanes, the sidewalks, the bike lanes, et cetera. So on this side, the 5.5-foot sidewalk. Similarly, the 5-foot bike lane continues along the entire corridor along this side. 2 through travel lanes. And then along the canal, there's a narrower shoulder, and then again a grass buffer, and then the continuation of that 8-foot shared use path. Now here, the view, zoomed in view is looking at the current location of the pedestrian crossing from the New Balance parking area, Lot C, to the north side of the roadway. This crossing here will be upgraded with high visibility crosswalk markings, new curb ramps, again bringing those up to ADA compliance, and then the installation of what we call rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So those are those flashing lights that you see on the east side or on the Riverwalk property for all those mid-block crossings. That allows the pedestrian to push the button, the lights start flashing for them, alert vehicles that someone might be in the crosswalk, they make the crossing safely, and then the lights turn off. Now heading further east, as we approach South Union Street, the pavement begins to transition to allow for a second approach lane to Union Street, matching the existing cross-section here that was constructed as part of the first phase of the Merrimack Street improvements on the east side of South Union. And then so looking down kind of in this segment here along the New Balance facility as well as the B&D warehousing, we had some initial abutter meetings. And based on those initial abutter meetings, we understand that there's a need for some access management to kind of balance the needs of these abutting businesses and their accesses, their delivery operations, balance those needs with the needs of the city to provide adequate pedestrian accommodations, enhanced bicycle accommodations. So what we're envisioning in this vicinity are a number of kind of larger, strategically placed curb cuts to allow the city to utilize its existing right-of-way through this area, but still allow the business operations to function similarly and comparably to how they do today, backing in their vehicles parallel to the building. Now looking kind of throughout the entire corridor, the project will also provide provisions for ornamental street lighting, similar to what you see on the east side. That's ideally on both sides of the roadway through here, for all the way from South Union to the limit of the project just prior to Broadway. Also looking at drainage system modifications. Given that the curb line isn't really shifting very much in either direction, the drainage system modifications that are required are relatively minimal. There'll be some utility pole relocations that are necessary, primarily west of Parker Street. And then we'll also be introducing or looking for opportunities to introduce street trees where they're feasible. So for example, where there are wider sections of the grass buffer, that may be an opportunity to provide some street trees, presuming that those are within the budget that's remaining from the MassWorks grant after the remaining improvements are designed and those functional improvements are designed and implemented. So kind of looking ahead to the next steps for the project in terms of design and on to construction. The 75% design we're looking to formalize and finalize hopefully by the end of May. At that point, we'll be meeting with the city to review that design, discussing any necessary potential easements or rights of entry that may be required for temporary grading of adjacent driveways and side slopes, et cetera. Heading into mid to late summer, we'd be looking to finalize the design probably by the end of July. And then preparing bid documents for the city that they can send out for contractors to bid. Looking to solicit bids by the probably late summer, early fall. And optimistically, if everything goes as planned, we'd hope that the contractor could be able to get out here early fall or late fall and start getting in some of the drainage system improvements, getting in some of the underground work for conduit, for lighting, et cetera. But the bulk of the sidewalk work and paving would be happening spring through probably end of June next summer, early summer. And with that, I guess we'll open it up to any questions that people may have.
Yep. So good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa Park. I'm the director of the Office of Planning and Development. And I work with the mayor as well as the planning staff. And we have someone here from DPW here as well as TEC in developing this project. So I know that there are a number of folks here who have vested interest in the improvements that we had just presented to you. So I don't know if you have any specific questions pertaining to what Jonathan just went over that you would like to get some additional clarification on. Yes, Betsy.
So my question has to do with the bicycle accommodation on the street. My understanding, there's a lot of truck traffic along this corridor because of the businesses that are here. And I like the idea of the multi-use trail on one side. I guess my question is, why even have an on-road bike lane? You could eliminate the bike lane and make the multi-use trail maybe 10 feet and then keep everybody off the road and reduce the conflicts with the trucks.
Right.
I was also concerned when you showed the diagram of this intersection, I didn't hear or see, so I'm very close to it, the sort of modern striping that would get a cyclist through an intersection like this is extremely busy and kind of dangerous intersection for cyclists to get through, and how they would have preferential treatment in order to safely get through on a bike lane. And likewise, if we're looking at in this city the dual use of this corridor, getting families from other parts of the city down this corridor and up to the trail, they're going to need to get through that intersection safely, and how to ensure that cyclists and pedestrians and families can get through there safely and not conflict with trucks and other traffic.
So the eastbound bike lane is proposed kind of in recognition of the fact that many eastbound bicyclists are not going to take the time to cross the roadway to get on the shared use path. So it's providing a safe place for them to ride. They still have the option to cross the roadway, either at the future rail trail crossing at Broadway, or mid-block crossing here, or at South Union. They have the opportunity to cross there to utilize the shared use path on the other side if they so choose. Many recreational bicyclists may choose to cross the roadway, take the extra time, and to use the shared use path, but
Do we have a lot of cyclists riding on this road now?
not an enormous amount. But typically with kind of enhancements such as this, shared use paths, it tends to one of those if you build it, they will come type of situations. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because I think the trend is going to be toward more cycle tracks as opposed to these open bike lanes, and especially in an area that has such high volume of truck traffic. I'd be concerned for the people driving the trucks and being stressed out and frustrated with
I mean, what I was say is that, so we've actually had some discussions about that. A couple of things. One, which is that, you know, one of the guys that we use in coming to what was proposed here tonight is a couple of things. One, which is the complete streets guidelines, and then also looking at what had been developed in the last land use planning study. So we tried to just sort of compile the two together and propose what seemed to make sense. What we can do is, like, we can't respond to your suggestion right away, but certainly we could take that back and sort of give that additional thought about, look, as far as the notion of how do you support economic development and at the same time enhance public safety, what really does make the most sense. So we'll you know, continue to talk about that and see whether or not that's something that we could just, you know, we'll give, if that makes sense for that section of the street.
So looking at the plan, we assume that the traffic lights on Broadway is not in that plan for now.
So, yes. So when we had initially submitted the grant proposal, we had asked for $6 million. And that included the work at that intersection, as well as improving this bridge that goes over the South Canal, because we think that that's in great need of repair. So when we got $3 million out of the 6, we had to make some really hard decisions in, like, where are, like, contained pockets that we might be able to, as opposed to, like, compromising the entire corridor, there are specific pockets that we might have to take out of the scope in order to try to get down to the $3 million budget. The bridge was an easy one because it's a very expensive price tag. The hard part was in thinking about the Broadway and Essex, because we do think that that intersection definitely requires improvement. But like I said, we didn't want to shortchange the other pieces of the corridor. But what we are looking to try to do is look at other sources of funding. So we're exploring, for example, separately adding that intersection into the transportation improvement plan so that we could get funding. I think it's probably about, like, our typical intersection work has been about $1.2 million. So that's how much that intersection work will take. So it's not like, if it was a small amount of money, absolutely, we'll find a way to make that happen. Because it's such an expensive intersection, we're gonna take that out and not do it, but try to find other pockets of money to try to get that intersection fixed. So we don't wanna leave it, like, we don't wanna do all these improvements and then leave that out, because I feel like that would just, like, yeah, no, so we're in agreement with you about that. It's just that timing-wise and money-wise, we weren't able to include with this scope, but it is our plan to try to get that done. But thank you for noticing that. Yes, Councilor.
Secondary gas, only 75% of the design,
25%.
25%.
Yes. So we're early on in the development, developing the design.
So for what part?
I'm sorry?
For what part?
For the entire corridor.
For the third?
Right, between South Union and Broadway. So the design right now for the entire corridor is at about 25%.
That just means that all the details have not yet
Yeah.
been added to the plan and such.
Okay, so that would be including what the church is saying and
Yeah, so the reason why we're having this meeting early is so that we could, like, incorporate those additional comments into the design that, as it fits the, what we're trying, fits the goals that we're trying to meet.
and this is for the style of when do you think that it's coming from? Next,
Ideally, we'll get the contractor in place this fall, as Jonathan mentioned, to start some of the drainage work, and some of the signal work.
Signal work could go in.
But the bulk of the work that you'll see on the roadway will occur next year, probably spring, summer. Mhm.
Can you elaborate on the curb cuts beside the warehouse that you mentioned?
Yep. So in this area where you have employee parking head in, that would be an open curb cut. And then we provide a short section of raised sidewalk. And then here and here, providing open curb cuts to allow your trailers to back in, to still utilize this stretch for parallel trailers up against the
Oh, and
building.
in the summer, that would attract the trailers back in.
Anything?
I mean, we've run some turning movements that we can present to you in a separate meeting that would.
Any place you put a sidewalk along that building, you're raising the elevation, am I correct? What the present street is?
Correct, the sidewalk would be
What do we
raised.
do with all the water that now drains across the street because there's no drainage on our side of the street?
There'll be provisions for drainage system to accommodate, to collect that drainage,
Also,
that sheet
if it
flow.
rises any farther, it runs into underneath our building.
Yeah, I think, given that the cobbles kind of along your building today are set lower than the pavement elevation today.
When they did the road 20 years ago, they raised the road up
Mhm.
and created basically a nice swimming areas.
Right, so I think what'll likely have to happen, and again, we haven't got into that level of the design and the three-dimensional modeling to look at the exact grading there, but what's likely to happen is to bring up the cobble elevation.
So we're gonna have snow bankings out to the street like that with this design with these curbs.
What do you mean, into the street?
When they plow, well, they usually about 4 feet off the curbstones when they plow. And presently, at least the last 20 years, there isn't a snowbank on any of that street because we can plow it off. We put curbs, I can't plow. We put signs, I can't plow floor. So now we're gonna squeeze it right up into all these trucks where they hit the parking. So now we're gonna have a bunch of trucks out on the street in drive lanes with snowbanks. It'll be more like a lot of the other streets in the city instead of one of the wide open clean ones that we want. Of course, all the water from our property surplus drips across the street. That won't hurt anybody either. One places.
Well, the roadway's crowned, so that we'll collect it along the new curb
I
line.
know, that's why
So
we're gonna
we
need 10
actually end
inches
up-
of water.
yeah.
And when it gets that high, it runs across the street.
I mean, one of the things that we are addressing is some, like, where some of those deficiencies already exist within the roadway system, we're looking to improve it. So, like, you could actually, when you walk down to the corridor, for example, you could see where the piles of dirt is. That's where the runoff had occurred, right? So there are always those evidences that you see, and we could actually factor those into the system. I know that we met with you guys, and so there was those challenge of how do you address your business operation. That you had mentioned everything from this tractor trailer parking and movement to the snow removal. It's sort of, there's no way to 100% address all the concerns that you have, and then also try to be able to reconcile it with all the other uses and the safety of that intersection.
Just change the whole texture.
But we're trying to, like, so we talked about everything from some curve to allow for some safety islands within the way people use the sidewalk. But we're looking at everything from curb stones so that there's lower sidewalk and all those other things to try to make sure that, like, it could work with your operation. So we're at 25% right now, and it could very well, and what we can do is, as we think this through, refine further, we could sit down and meet with you again to just sort of continue to flush this out further.
After the last time they did it, we had to install 3-inch pumps to keep up with the water and just in the yard, so we weren't waiting around for the water. You had any curbs to any of that or raise anything? We're gonna be in holes.
No, the detailed design would take into account the regrading of that area to pitch it back toward the gutter line along the roadway.
Yeah, under the circumstances of the last time that this work was done.
The line is, where our main doors are, in between the two
Yeah,
buildings.
yeah.
We ended up with a foot and a half of water.
With our other work, I can assure you, we have improved those drainage issues.
Okay.
So that is our intent, is to continue to improve and not make things worse for you guys.
Great.
That's definitely
Like
not what we're
when
trying
they
to do.
did the last pavement, they took where the office parking lot is, the last 3 days, we had as much as 8 inches of water in there. And we went and complained about it. Sorry, that's the way it is. We had to bring in over 100 tons of fill to raise our parking lot because of what you people did. At that time.
Okay,
Years ago.
I wasn't there,
No,
so I
it's-
can't speak to what occurred before,
Well-
but we are working, we do work closely with DPW, we work with water and sewer, we have our engineers, so we'll work to try to resolve the problem, because it seems like it's a problem now, right? And we're gonna try to fix it.
It's a problem from 20 years ago. It wasn't, I mean, going back years ago, that whole side of the building, all those green doors, you had trucks just backing in and off the street, you know? I mean, that whole area, going back to the turn of the last century, there's never been a curb stone alongside there. Never any drainage. And I like your nice pretty poles, they look good. How quick can they replace them?
Why do you say that?
Down along our building, this past year, 3 of them were taken down.
And we went there almost 5 months with no lights. And that is on the other side of the street from New Balance at 5 o'clock in the morning. A ton of their employees are starting to walk up and down that street in the dark because they can't get the lights replaced. I mean, I have every pole number on that whole street because I'm constantly after the electric company for a light out and poles missing.
Well, we have a representative here from New Balance, so we work closely whenever there are issues that they let us know, and we try to rectify that as quickly as possible, so, yeah. So we have residents calling us, so we do, when we hear about these concerns, we try to correct it. Sometimes if there are things that we can't immediately control, and there are things that we basically need to bring others into play, like the utility companies, so we do the best that we can.
Well, like I said, I mean, the poles look nice, but I know of one job in Arlington where they put the poles up and it was 2 years to get a replacement pole. You know, I hope that's all changed.
No.
I know it takes 2, 3, 4 months to get one of these standardized aluminum poles.
We only, if it's working with utilities, the only thing we can do is continue to encourage them
I'll
and
work
prod them
with
along,
you.
so we will do so.
I mean, one thing that could be considered is to include some in the contract for a stockpile potentially.
Well, the other suggestion I make is instead of putting the lights right on the street, put them on the other side of the sidewalk away from the cars.
Yeah, I mean, the exact location of the light poles hasn't been set yet. This is kind of one option, is to provide them closer to the curb line.
Put a guardrail in front of them.
I mean,
We've had a police cruiser hit them, a medical emergency. The third one, I don't know what made that disappear. It was just in the street when we showed up in the morning.
Right. I mean, the right-of-way constraint out here is a challenge throughout the corridor. For example, along the canal, the city's right-of-way is basically right along the back of this shared-use path. So there's really not much room there to put the light poles there. And then on the other side of the street, there are utility poles, you know, past Parker anyhow. There are utility poles on that side of the road that are along the curb line. So the idea was, from a visual standpoint, to keep them in line with the existing poles.
Councilor, do you have a question? Oh, okay. Yes.
Wanted to address the parking on the west end. Currently, it's both sides Bond Street parking, and it's been reduced to one side.
Yes.
It's tight, you know, if we were to expand or have employees, you know, grow someplace for parking, where you're eliminating half of it. How you thought that through?
Well, you want to start the answer?
I mean, it really,
From a technical standpoint?
well, again, it goes back to the right-of-way constraint. So the desire here is to provide sidewalk on one side for pedestrian accommodations and the shared use path on the canal side, consistent with the land use planning study. Shared use paths are supposed to, by standard, if at all possible, to have a grass buffer. So we've provided the minimum width grass buffer through here. That really leaves very little room left to provide that second parking lane on the far side within the right-of-way, not enough to provide that. So there would, if the city desired to try to provide parking on both sides of the road, there'd have to be some sort of compromise in either we don't provide the shared use path there, or a narrower sidewalk perhaps, some consideration for, I mean, there's got to be a give and take in order to provide that parking on both sides.
Just out of curiosity, how many do your employees frequently park on the south side?
Most of my employees are parking in the middle of alleyway, but, you know, if it were to expand, there's no place to park.
Because in all honesty, one of the things that we've heard with so we've had a chance to talk to some of the property owners here, not everyone, but some of them, and what we've heard is they actually like the fact that there was no parking on the south side. Because it was impacting on everything from visibility as they're coming in and out of their property and a number of other things.
Okay.
So they actually liked it, so.
Well, there's a lot of congestion with class in the morning and in the afternoon. It's a tough stretch of the street there with traffic being blocked.
Right. I mean, and they were one of the organizations that we talked to for us, but they weren't the only ones.
Right.
They're taking over the parking spaces for the rest of the building that he's in.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is no parking.
I'm just
Right.
like, yeah.
So your building is just literally right on the other side.
They
Right,
share,
on the other
they
side.
share
Yeah.
the lot.
Yeah.
Right.
I come at
I
3 o'clock in
see
the afternoon.
massive
and I'm-
congestion on that stretch
Yeah, I
of
think
the street.
mornings and afternoons, yeah,
in trouble.
yeah.
And the street's blocked, you know, for at least a block or two in the morning. So I don't see
Go up
any
through
use
there in
out
the
of
morning, you
a
want
bicycle
lane.
pedestrian lane.
Yeah.
Because of the traffic that will be there, you know, people that are waiting.
So,
I'm just thinking of future expansion.
Yeah.
You know, there's limited parking in that area to begin with.
right.
And, you know, I don't know if it's even legal. I mean, it's, you know, people park on the street on both sides.
And interestingly enough, what I've heard is that some of the folks on this side actually park across on the other side of Canal even. And whether or not at some point could also, if that's the case, and they can be some of the surplus, meet some of the surplus parking needs, whether at some point we could continue to make improvements from an access standpoint to South Canal area so that we could make that work better.
Yeah, my other comment was going to be, most of the people that are parking there are working on the other side of the street, so they're going to jaywalk across in the middle of to get across from their parking spot. Because there's really no provisions, and you're not going to walk down to a light
Right.
to come back the other way. I know why.
We're also like, yeah, so we've been actually talking about whether or not it makes sense to introduce like another pedestrian walk, so mid-street forward walkway. So I don't know whether that's something that you think would be helpful and that we should include more strongly, you know.
Yeah, just the thought process
Yeah.
and how much parking is available for future expansion. And, you know, if we're really truly developing it, where's everybody going to park?
I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's almost like there's a cat and mouse kind of to it as well, right? So in one hand, you want to get to a point where you actually have a parking problem because what it tells you is that there's an increased level of economic development activity, whether it's the people who are coming here to work or for live or well, for whatever reason. And at some point, as parking needs arise, I think we have to think about other options of parking as opposed to just on-street parking and surface parking. Does it make sense to then have a structured parking, for example? So there are ways where we don't have to just think about the horizontal development scenario, we can also think vertical.
And I have one more comment on, if you're traveling north on Parker Street, you want to make a left. That's Russian Loop, and I know you have turn lanes on
So,
in the other directions, but you know, are you saying that there should be no left turn?
so if you're heading east on Merrimack Street?
North on Parker.
I'm sorry, so if you're heading north on Parker and you want to turn left onto Merrimack?
On Merrimack Street.
Okay.
Yeah, so here.
So the fact that it's not a protected left-hand turn, I think,
Yeah. And that blocks traffic.
Right.
I'm sure you've studied that.
so one of
in
the things,
detail.
right, so one of the things, and I'll let them go into the more the technical details, but one of the things in determining the configurations of that intersection, because we know how important it is the traffic volume. So, you know, where you have, I think, the protected left-hand turn is where you have the greatest traffic movement in that direction. But Jonathan, you're the traffic engineer, so you correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to be corrected.
No, really, the lane use here is basically determined by the amount of left turning volume there. There wasn't just enough left turning volume during most time periods of the day to.
He is present at the meeting, so that does cover something.
Yeah, for example, I mean, we're just the traffic counts are indicating there's only like 12 left turning in the morning peak hour, so that's one every 5 minutes. So, in cases if there were little fluctuations in the peak left turning volume, that lane would essentially become like a de facto left turn lane for that peak 15-minute period or something. But during most times of the day, most peak hours, the through volume is so high that those two lanes are needed to process that amount of traffic.
But I do think that with these improvements, we're going to be upgrading the whole system connected to the traffic signals. What we're finding in other parts of the city is that there's only so much improvement we can make because we're just constrained by the antiquity of the equipment. In this instance, as things change, as conditions change, as developments occur, the volume changes, I think we have the ability to sort of reconfigure the timing of the intersections and all those other things, so because they're upgraded systems. So I think that's something that we can tweak in the future as needed.
Right, the existing traffic signal controller out here is antiquated. It cannot support the number of phases that we would need to provide those exclusive left turn movements and such. The new controller will have full capability and flexibility to modify the phasing as the traffic demand changes over the years.
So we'll be here for a little bit longer if you have some additional questions. My business card is on the table. Feel free to reach out to me with any additional thoughts or questions that you may have. You will probably see us around here as the project moves forward. And if you have signed in, when you have contact information, if you also have your contact information, as things develop, we will periodically keep you guys up to date on what is occurring in the corridor and the work. Does it have the email addresses?
Yes.
Is it all legible? Because I have emailed people in the past and they bounce back, so if you could just like double check, that would be
Long
great.
before you'll have a hard copy on what you're gonna be doing, the drainage and curb, all my stuff.
That would be probably the 75% design plans, and that would be, we're developing those throughout the month of May. So toward the end of May or mid-May, we'd probably have something that we could
Something like
review
that.
in more detail with you.
You get to see them.
Certainly, we.
Thank you.
yeah.
That would be wonderful.
All right.
Other than that,
Thank you.
very much.
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here tonight. And like I said, feel free to reach out to us with any questions, and we'll continue to let you know some of the significant milestones in the development of the project.